On this edition of SciTech Now, drones are taking flight across America.
This planet continues to have more people on it, so we have to do a better job on the land we have and get more out of the resources we put in, get higher yields to feed more people.
A closer look at the battle against a determined invader taking place right here in New York. We'll have a little fun with the multi-billion-dollar gaming industry. We go underground to see what's threatening the water you drink and learn about a life-saving technology most of us use every day. Coming up next on SciTech Now. Hello, I'm Simon Perez, and welcome to SciTech Now, our weekly program bringing you the latest breakthroughs in science, technology, and innovation right here in Central New York and across the country. Let's begin by looking up. In just about every state, drones are in the air and in the news. Sometimes they're sightseeing, flying over the Seattle Space Needle and New York's George Washington Bridge. But in America's heartland, researchers and farmers are using drones to help figure out the future of food.
Well, it used to be in agriculture, it was all hands-on. You drove the tractors, you manually changed things, but now computers have taken a lot of the tedious stuff out.
Jeff Sandburn is a corn, wheat, and soybean farmer in Portland, Michigan, and his job has changed a lot over the years as innovation in agricultural technology has increased at a breakneck pace. And while not all farmers are eager to adopt this new technology, Jeff is.
We only have so much land that can grow crops, productive crops. And this planet continues to have more people on it. So we have to do a better job on the land we have and get more out of the resources we put in, get higher yields to feed more people.
But what if there was a way to increase crop yield and farmers' profitability while decreasing over-fertilization and water waste? At Michigan State University, a team of researchers is piloting a project that will do just that.
The drone, we call it the giant mozzie because it's like mozzie is a nickname for mosquitoes in Australia. I used to work in Australia. It's very, it sounds like a mosquito, but I use it to fly over farmers' field and detect changes in plant performances.
Bruno Basso, an Italian native, has relocated to America's heartland to pilot a new research project using unmanned aerial vehicles, otherwise known as drones.
When a drone flies like this specific type flies over a field, it detects information about reflectance of light from the plant. So you are able to get an information for a very large area at a fine scale.
Commercial drones have been used by farmers for years to provide a bird's-eye view of their crops, and it's estimated that 90% of all drone use by the year 2025 will be in agriculture. But Bruno's drone does much more than take pretty pictures from above. This drone is able to survey large sections of land down to the millimeter, generating detailed maps which lend farmers valuable insight into their fields.
Everything that I do in a field costs me money, whether it's the seed I buy, the fertilizer I use, the chemicals that are applied. If I can get the most efficient use out of that resource, whether it's seed, fertilizer, which fertilizer is very energy intensive, I want to grow the most crop I can out of that given unit of fertilizer.
But increasing the amount of fertilizer does not necessarily mean a farmer will see an increase in the amount of crops he is able to produce. And for Bruno, a uniform application of fertilizer is simply a waste.
So the uniform application that normally a farmer does, by definition, he overestimates this input in one area and he underestimates inputs in the other area. And so that's the important. One size fits all is not the case in agriculture because there is a lot of variability. So in the end, what does the drone do? Tells us about that variability.
Understanding field variability is one part of the puzzle, but for all that information to be useful, a farmer has to know what practical measures to take. That's why Bruno is developing easy-to-use software that not only breaks the information down, it actually creates a predictive model that allows a farmer to digitally test out a change in their farming practices without any risk to their yield. The implications of Bruno's research are clear. Smart advancements in agricultural technology could be the key to increasing farmers' profitability, decreasing the environmental impact, and increasing food production to support an ever-growing global population.
Experts predict 30,000 drones of all types will occupy U.S. airspace by 2020. Across the United States, invasive species threaten our native plants and animals. These nuisances are in forests, fields, and waterways. Here's how Central New York plans to stop the spread of invasive species in what's called the Queen of American Lakes.
The beauty of Lake George is inarguable, but what lies beneath is threatening the Queen of American Lakes: invasive species. Eric Sy, the executive director of the Fund for Lake George, compares this body of water to a fort under siege. Lake Champlain, north of here, has 50 invasives. The Hudson River, double that. Lake George has just 5, and they want to keep it that way.
We're starting to clean up what's in the lake and keep the lake this unbelievable resource that so many people enjoy and love for its clear, clean water. The only way we're going to do that is aggressive vigilance.
Here are the 5 currently living in the waters of Lake George. Eurasian milfoil, the tangling vines that look like they may have fallen off of Charlie Brown's Christmas tree. Curly leaf pondweed, the sci-fi sounding spiny water flea, a type of crustacean, zebra mussels, and the Asian clam, which we spotted right away just a few feet from shore. In order to help fight the existing battles and stop any new ones, the Fund for Lake George has teamed up with the Lake George Park Commission to make sure you don't add to the problem.
Increasingly, to treat these species, we have been paying more and more money every year. The latest big expense is for Asian clams that got in only a few years ago. And I think we've certainly spent hundreds of thousands on the Asian clam alone. So that compelled a lot of people to say, listen, this is not a cost-efficient approach. Brought together a very interesting mix of public and private interests and said, we have to focus on prevention.
Do you mind if I just take a quick look? Thanks.
The Fund for Lake George provided a grant of $10,000 to the Park Commission to train 50 inspectors who will be greeting boaters at one of 6 different spots along the 32-mile body of water.
Our inspectors take a look at the boat and the trailer and make sure it meets that standard of clean, drained, and dry. If it doesn't, no worries. We have decontamination stations right on site that are basically high pressure, hot water, and we power wash off the hull and rinse out the motor.
Inspectors will be looking for any signs of the invasives on the boat or tucked inside some of the nooks and crannies, like the bilge area, or on the trailers used to drop it into the water.
If you're coming from one lake that has an infestation of, say, zebra mussels, and you go to another lake, that water that's sitting in your bilge or even in your motor, once you start up your motor, that gets flushed back out into the lake, and that can start a new infestation. Once they launch into Lake George, they come back out and we seal that boat, basically meaning that it's a zip tie between the boat and the hull. And if you don't go to another water body and you don't break that seal, you come back to Lake George the next time and you don't need a new inspection because you're not in threat of bringing an invasive species back to the lake.
Dave Wick of the Lake George Park Commission says since the start of the program in mid-May, over 1,600 boats have been inspected. Just 5% were found to have invasives. Where's the most likely place where some of these invasives will latch onto the boat? Is it along the shore here or out near the narrows by the islands?
Yeah, we have most of the invasives that we're finding are really at the access points to the lake, so at the marinas primarily, but they spread pretty quickly throughout the lake. And so we're seeing them in a lot of the shallower areas. Norwal, where we just launched, has Asian clams. It also has a milfoil bed. The town of Hague launch has a big milfoil bed in there that we're trying to address. So we're seeing it really congregate around the launches.
Rick Gage has owned and operated a marina in Bolton Landing for years and is concerned about what these non-native organisms could do to the lifeblood of his business.
There's very many bodies of waters that have well over 100 of those things, and we don't need it here. We don't want it here. And this is a very manageable way to prevent that from happening. And it will grow if you don't do it. It's going to happen.
The fund for Lake George matched the $350,000 from the state that will keep this project in place for the next 2 years. According to Cy, this is the only program of its kind east of the Mississippi, and he would like to see it expanded inside the Blue Line.
The Adirondacks has 3,000 lakes and ponds, 30,000 miles of rivers and streams, and we do not have an invasives prevention program for the park. We need it. What we're doing on Lake George, we hope will be an inspiring model, example of what needs to be done around this unique place, which, you know, ultimately lives or dies on the pristine nature of its waters. That's why people come here.
To learn more about what's being done at Lake George, you can visit our website. Americans know how to have fun. In fact, they spent more than $15 billion last year on video and computer games. That trend pushed both businesses and schools to think creatively about gaming. In fact, one university is already graduating the next generation of game developers.
At a time when 59% of Americans report playing video games, and the average time people spend online has outpaced TV viewing hours, the gaming landscape leaves a lot of space for developers to experiment. One place that's happening is at NYU Polytechnic School's Game Innovation Lab, where students and faculty create virtual bubble wrap, digital animation tools, and motion detecting games that are meant to help kids with math.
Well, we basically play. That's what we do.
This is where PhD students come to play. The lab opened in 2011, marrying function and aesthetics in pursuit of games.
The idea was to combine technology and entertainment and to create a place where engineers could benefit from working with artists and designers to shape the future of entertainment technology.
1.2 billion people around the world are gaming, according to a 2013 industry survey. That's 17% of the global population. And it's not just guys. 46% of the world's online gamers are women.
In the way that video game design has progressed, it's definitely become a much more open and trying to become more broadly accessible medium.
Students in computer science, art, education, math, and design find common ground in the lab, creating games for learning, health, and to solve problems.
They bring in billions of dollars of revenue a year globally, right? And they're just as much a part of everyday culture now as movies or novels, any of those things. But we're also really interested in how gaming technology and approaches can be used to solve practical problems like stroke rehabilitation or math education.
Nearly 2/3 of gamers play with other people, either face-to-face or online. And to encourage that kind of interaction, the lab's artist-in-residence designed the Lightning Bug game, which calls for 2 players to touch hands so that one can shoot lasers out of a spiked sleeve.
I'm exploring costumes as game controllers, so the intersection between wearable technology and games. He's wearing a power pack that lights up as he collects power, and then when we hold hands, the power gets distributed from the power pack to the gauntlet, and that is the only way the player is able to shoot. And then we play this in this large dome here.
In decades of game development, technology has led to faster processing speeds, sharper graphics, and more elaborate storylines. Despite recent industry layoffs, those advances have created a larger pool of programmers and products.
So at first computers had a lot of constraints. You know, they didn't have so much memory, they were slow. Now they're really fast. We have all kinds of sensors, so there's no reason the computer can't come a lot further to you and interact with you the way that you're comfortable. Right? Read your body language, understand your facial expressions, be a little sensitive to when's the right time to interrupt you, that sort of thing.
It used to be that making a game was actually a very technically difficult thing. So over the last couple of years, the tools have gotten so much better to the point where pretty much anybody can sit down and make a game if they want to.
An indie movement has emerged in gaming, offering an alternative to big budgets and brand names, and making room for lesser-known programmers to break in. But despite evolving technology at game creators' disposal, faculty in the lab warn students not to overcomplicate their games.
I think this is a general trend, you know, with technology as it becomes smaller and more capable of doing things. How can we use this really affordable sensor to make, you know, this game? or rather, this is the game idea and this is how we can use technology to enhance the idea.
There's still a lot to be learned from the smaller gems that we had by necessity 30 years ago when technology wasn't there yet. Well, now we have all 3D graphics and big controllers and everything, and everyone always wants to push that, and that's great, and I'm happy that that's happening, but I think there's a lot of space underneath that curve that hasn't been fully explored yet.
More than half of all U.S. households own at least one game console. We pretty much take for granted the water that comes from our faucets is safe to drink. But the labyrinth that water travels through beneath the streets before it gets to your house might not be as pristine as you think. In this segment, Jim Kircher takes a look at what's really down there in our underground water system.
There was a time when a river ran through St. Louis's Forest Park, but this is not it. All of this is the result of careful planning, landscaping, and plumbing. To find the remnants of the real river that once flowed through Forest Park, the River de Pere, you have to have the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District unlock a hatch to the stairway that leads down to an amazing work of engineering that in one era was a solution, but today is something of a problem.
Treatment plant.
Our tour guide is the Sewer District's PR guy, Lance Lacone.
This is clean water we're looking at here, and the tunnel next to this we'll look at in a moment is where the sewage is.
Right.
And so these twin tunnels...
St. Louis started building sewers in the 1850s after the big cholera epidemic. And as the city and its industries and neighborhoods grew, so did the importance of a good sewer system. In fact, in 1916, the city celebrated the completion of a major project with a formal dinner inside a giant sewer tunnel just before it went into service. If there was a golden age of sewers, this was it. And the city kept building big, expensive projects designed to efficiently flush everything out of the city, but still right into the river.
I'll give an example. In 1969, when this country put a man on the moon, only 5% of the wastewater from St. Louis is going to a treatment plant. So treatment plants are
and the rest going into the river.
Yeah, so treatment plants are relatively a new phenomenon, if you would, but this is how it was designed. This is how it's to function. It was state-of-the-art at the time.
But it's not state-of-the-art anymore, and that's a problem in St. Louis and in a lot of older cities that have what's called combined sewer systems. The pipes and tunnels carry both sewage and stormwater, and most of the time it goes to the treatment plant. But big rainstorms can send more water into the pipes than they can handle. Where does it go? Well, that's the next stop on the tour. Downriver from the park, the River de Pere takes the form of a concrete channel, but it often doesn't look or act much like a river. At times like this, most of the water is actually running underneath in a big sewer. And when it gets full in a storm, instead of backing up into basements, the sewer spills out into the concrete channel, bypassing the treatment plant and going straight into the Mississippi.
And so this is one of the overflow points here, where if we get too much rainwater coming into the system, the water will come out of here and spill into the River de Pere and go down the Mississippi River.
Is this sewage in here then?
We are standing in a sewer. This is heading to the treatment plant, goes through there. During a heavy rainstorm, this chamber we're standing in right now could easily be full of water. Yeah. And it needs some place to go because there's not enough capacity in the system. So it would go out through these outfalls here into the River de Pere.
So explain to me...
This system may be good for protecting basements, but it's bad for the environment. And the EPA and the Coalition for the Environment sued the sewer district, saying it was in violation of the Clean Water Act. The district settled, agreeing to spend nearly $5 billion over 23 years to remedy the situation.
We're going to be building large storage tunnels. The longest of those will be 9 miles long, 200 feet below ground, and almost 30 feet diameter. So they're going to be massive, massive projects.
These come with a big price tag that businesses and homeowners will end up helping to pay.
$4 billion, whatever.
4.7 billion, 5 billion, call it, over 23 years.
Does it solve the problem?
No, because you're always going to have a storm that can come along and overwhelm the system.
In cities, a big part of the problem is that rainwater runs off the rooftops, parking lots, streets. It doesn't seep into the ground, it rushes into the sewers. And while new storage tunnels can take care of some of that, what if you could slow things down here? Well, as part of the settlement, the sewer district will be spending millions on what's called green infrastructure. The Metropolitan Sewer District, of course, by definition, is in the business of building and maintaining sewers. It is also these days in the business of gardening. This is an experimental rain garden in Old North St. Louis at the corner of 14th and Clinton. It wasn't very green yet when we first visited, but you could see how it was built to catch, hold, and absorb rainwater. The drains in the street don't go into the sewers, they go into this basin. A few weeks later, there was a spring downpour, and all over the city, water was rushing over the concrete and into the sewers. Things were filling up fast. But in the rain garden, the water had been captured and was flowing through the rocks and into the basin. If it reduces flow on a small scale, the idea is to build more of these and make it work on a large scale.
So if you build the stuff you need to build, the tunnels that will handle that overflow, store it, and then push it into the system gradually, right? And you combine that with reducing flow, does that solve the problem?
It gets us to where we need to be. That's our plan.
But remember, this is a 20-year project, and in St. Louis they won't be blowing things up and starting over. They will be working to improve the existing system. And let's give credit where credit is due. This system is listed as a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark, right along with the Brooklyn Bridge and the Panama Canal.
According to the Environmental Protection Agency, there are major water pollution concerns in more than 700 cities in the United States because they have combined sewer systems. We see them every day. Most of us obey them without question. But how do they really work? Let's head to Florida for a look inside the traffic light.
I just went yellow. Other side's going to go green.
We want traffic to flow efficiently, and everybody's doing their best to make that happen. The frustration that comes with traffic has to do with capacity. There's only so much room on the road for the vehicles, and so in order to improve the traffic flow, you're going to have to increase capacity. We manage probably about 300 intersections in Central Florida. In Orange County alone, if you take all the cities and unincorporated Orange County and add them all up, we're probably pushing 1,500 traffic signals or more, maybe closer to 2,000 just in Orange County and Seminole County for sure. There are several agencies that we need to work with. First and foremost is our client, which would be the local government. So we work with generally the city, county engineer, public works department, and we go over their needs and what they're looking for. And in every case, they're working with the Florida Department of Transportation.
The biggest advent to public safety has been the countdown pedestrian signal, which has aided the pedestrians in having the knowledge of how much time do they have in crossing the street, as opposed to a flashing hand that said this starts flashing and you had no idea of how much time you had left. The countdown tells you precisely how much time you have left.
At every intersection, there is the traffic signal cabinet that controls the traffic signals. We have the control unit, which has been programmed through the engineering design. And so the program has different movements. We have 8 standard movements of traffic, the 4 left turns and the 4 through movements. And then we have the pedestrian signals, the 4 movements of the pedestrian movements concurrent with the green light of the through traffic. These are detector amplifiers. The amplifiers are telling you where the vehicles are going to be and what's going on. They are sending information to the control unit. Now the controller is literally turning the red light on and off. It's turning the yellow light on and off, and it's turning the green light on and off. A new traffic signal is probably going to run you close to $250,000 per intersection. The Department of Transportation has an interlocal agreement with the local city or county on state roads that says if we build the road and we build the traffic signal, you're going to take over the management of that. And so all the costs associated with managing and operating that traffic signal falls back on the local government. But new technology is slow coming because of the safety factors. DOT is very specific about what they will allow to be integrated into a traffic signal system. When you really boil it down, it comes back to safety and efficiency. And being safe is the most important thing.
That's it for this edition of SciTech Now. For more information on science, technology, and innovation, visit our website at wcny.org/SciTechNow. And you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Next week on SciTech Now, find out how one Adirondack town is showing the rest of rural America how to get on the internet fast lane. Check out the efforts of a group trying to make race irrelevant when it comes to success in science and technology. Then we sit down with hackers as they crack open the digital universe and discover how one company is making shipping as simple as taking a photo with your cell phone. I'm Simon Perez. Please join us for stories of science, technology, and innovation on the next SciTech Now. I'm Simon Perez. We'll see you next week on SciTech Now.